This is the third game in our video series on the King's Gambit and hacking away with the King's Gambit, destroying your opponents with this romantic opening. And I found some very interesting games, I think, to show you, which basically demonstrate the energy behind this opening. Now, I do think openings have their individual personalities. I mean, like the Berlin obviously has a very solid personality. The King's Gambit really has a rather outrageous kind of Don Quixote personality. It's a rather sort of romantic but yet slightly mad opening to play. And I found some games that really, I think, demonstrate the personality behind the opening. In this game, I'm going to be looking at two players. Again, maybe two players you haven't heard of, but I do like this game a lot. I think it's a really beautiful and great game. And the players we're going to use are Johan Verhoff and Mikhail Kalgrin. So these, again, I haven't heard these players before this game, but in this game, Johan Verhoff, with the white pieces, plays a beautiful attacking game. So we get our critical position after f4. E takes f4, knight to f3, and I'm only concentrating on g5 for this these King's Gambit videos because this is meant to be the refutation of knight to f3. It's Fischer's move. Fischer said this is the refutation of knight to f3. So I suggest there's lots of stuff out there on other moves, but none of the other moves are meant to give white too much worry. Again, if a simple thing to remember, if black doesn't play g5, you should be trying to continue with d4 and simply recapturing your pawn on f4. But g5 is the critical option. And here our move order is knight to c3. So the move order I'm recommending that you play is knight to c3 here. Then after bishop to g7, you could go for this idea of h4 and knight g5, which we looked at in the last game. But I'm also recommending this d4 move. And it's really up to you which move you decide to play. Now, d4 to me looks like a very good option. I mean, you've got both your knights developed, both your pawns developed. You'll probably just simply, you want to go g3 next. When you've got this set up with your two knights out and your pawns in the center, your next move is g3. And this is one idea you're relying on. For example, let's say black plays d6. Now, you must really play g3. So as a rule, when you've got your knights developed and your pawns in the center, g3 is a very important move to play. And now, there are a number of ways black can deal with this, but g4 is meant to be the best way for black. I mean, really what you're trying to do in moves like h4 and g3, you're trying to destroy this pawn formation of f4 and g5. And once you destroy this pawn formation, you will have more open lines, like on the f file, to attack along. So you're just trying to remove these strong pawns away from the position they're in. I mean, here, after the move g3, if black took on g3, well, there's a number of good moves here. I mean, for example, you could even consider going bishop takes g5 here, bring another piece into the game. Also, the simple pawn takes g3 would leave you with ample compensation, because now something like h6, bring your pieces in as quickly as possible, like bishop c4, maybe knight c6. And here you could even consider castling with threats against f7, this kind of idea. So after the move g3, black shouldn't really take this pawn. Now, if white's given a chance, you should take on f4 next move, and this would win your pawn back with quite a promising position. So the main move here is g4. Now, in the game, we look at this kind of idea where white just leaves his piece on f3 and takes on f4 with his bishop. Now, something you don't do is that you don't sacrifice your knight when you first play g3. So as a rule, you can sacrifice your knight on f3, but only if you haven't played g3. So the best move after this g4 move is simply to move your knight. Somewhere like knight to h4 is the most active. Remember, in the King's Gambit, always look at ways to go forwards. And this leaves the possibility of coming into f5. And now the main move here is f3, trying to keep this extra pawn, and white should now continue bishop to e3. This is a position that's been tested out in a lot of games in practice. Schulman has played this, the American Grandmaster Schulman, with white. Let me just talk about things you're trying to achieve with this position. Well, black is a pawn up. Now, what you're trying to achieve with white, you're trying to castle queenside. So you want to go queen d2. You want to castle your king queenside. So this is a very safe way to get your pieces developed. At some stage, your knight on h4 can hop into f5. A lovely square for the knight. Once your queen is on d2, you can also think about annoying black with bishop g5, this kind of idea. And a very important concept, these pawns on g4 and f3, you can try to break them up, and one critical way of doing that was with the move h3, a very important pawn break. But all in all, I think white has great compensation because of the central pawns here. I mean, let's just have a look at some more moves. For example, knight e7, queen d2. Let's say knight d7. This is what Schulman's opponent played against him. Now, castle queenside, following our normal development. Knight b6. Bishop d3. Last white piece is developed. Bishop e6. And now this important plan of destroying this kingside pawn formation, h3. Black tried to keep it together, h5. And now lining the rook up against the black king. Knight came to c4. White simply took this off and now played bishop to f4. A much better square for the bishop. He can try ideas of e5 here now with white. The knight can come to f5. And indeed, after queen d7, white did put his knight on f5. And I think we can see that white has a very good initiative here. Black is still not able, he hasn't managed to get his king castled. White has got his knight to f5. He's ready to destroy the pawns over here. And this is a very good initiative. So a kind of rule in this position, if you go for the d4 move, which I think is, I'll be honest, a more theoretical sound idea. Let's say after bishop g7, d4, if black plays a move like d6, you've got both your knights developed, both your pawns in the center. So what you do next, you play g3. So remember this g3 idea, but only when you have your knights and pawns in the center. So this is what you're trying to achieve. Now, what happens if instead of d6 here, black plays g4 in this position? Well, now I think it's correct to sacrifice. And the line I'm going to look at here in this game is bishop takes f4. You can also sacrifice bishop c4 first, but the point with this is if something like pawn takes f3, queen takes f3. And this game is concentrating on this kind of compensation for white here. White only has one pawn for the piece, but he has good development. He has pressure on the f-file. All this is often we're going for this pressure on the f-file against f7. He has chance to castle quickly. So in actual fact, it's very good compensation here. So let's go back to the game in question and see what happened. Now, they played a rather strange move order, should I say. Well, not strange, but here white played d4 first. I'm not recommending this move order. I'm recommending you play knight to c3 first. And only here can you decide, I mean, only now do you play d4. I think it's better having a knight on c3 than a pawn on d4. And I think this is quite important in some variations. I mean, for example, bishop g7. I mean, let's say against d6, you do the same thing. You go to d4 here. And, well, if bishop g7, we have our knights and pawns in the center, so we go g3. And if black ever tries this g4 move, then we go for bishop takes f4. I mean, let's have a look at let's go through this a little bit more now and see this compensation. Let me prove to you that white has a great deal of compensation. For example, pawn takes f3, queen takes f3, knight to c6, naturally attacking d4. Now, there was a game played, which we're going to have a look at now, but this is a subline, not the main game, but it was played between two very good amateur players, where we're going to demonstrate white's play. I mean, castle queen side here is one way to keep the initiative going, but very quickly in this game, bishop b5 was played, developing as well. a6, white took this knight off, castle kingside. And again, pressure on the f-file is all important. Queen e7 was played, and now a nice tactical move, bishop to g5. Trying to force the black queen away from defense of f7. And once you have your queen and rook on the f-file like this bishop g5 move is a really powerful idea. I mean, black can't take on g5 because you take on f7 and then take on f8. And this would be devastating for white. So queen at e6 was played, and now here white's played rook, should have played rook on a to e1. with e5 coming next, with a phenomenally strong attacking position. For example, let's give some typical developing moves. e5. Again, this e5 move, we see it come up a lot in these videos, but normally only once white has developed every piece. And even though white's a piece down here, I think he has a great attacking idea. In this position, can you see a way for white to bring another piece into the attack? How should white look at weak squares in your opponent's position when you're trying to attack? So try to locate weak squares that your opponent has. Try to find a way to get your pieces in towards those weak squares. Well, I see a weak square on f6. So I try to bring my knight into that weak square. And if black finally gets castled, the knight comes into f6 with devastating effects. And after something like king to h8, now it's going to be completely winning for white. So that's just a little example of some play you can get in this line. But now let's go back to the main game, and we're going to see this in action again, this idea of just allowing black to take your piece on f3 whilst you build up the initiative. So in this game, after g5, knight to c3 is my recommended move order. Now, the move order actually went d4, bishop g7, knight c3. So it's similar, but just slightly different move order here. And now black played this g4 idea again. What happens if black does not play g4? You should play g3. If he plays knight to c6 in this position, you could even consider going pawn to d5 here. That's a pretty good option. But in general, if he doesn't go g4, you play g3. And if he does play g4, you sacrifice with bishop takes f4. Of course, you must be brave to play this, but come on, you're playing the King's Gambit. Remember, go back to the days of Morphy. You've got to morph into the great Morphy when you play the King's Gambit. You've got to be willing to throw your pieces away. You know, have a complete disrespect for your pieces when you play the King's Gambit. Have a smile on your face, you know, to say, have a piece. There you go. It doesn't matter. I'm going to checkmate your king. After all, shouldn't that be what chess is all about? Just go straight for your opponent's king. And with this early g4 idea, this is what I recommend you do. In the game between Verhoef and Kohlgren, it continued pawn takes f3, and now the queen came to f3, a typical attacking position here. And now, well, knight to c6 is quite logical, but and this is what was played, bishop to c4. Now, what other moves can be played here? Well, if bishop takes d4, a super greedy move, there's a number of ways you can play against this. I mean, bishop c4 yourself is very good, just developing normally. I mean, another good move here, instead of bishop c4, is actually knight to b5, but bishop to c4, knight to b5. Okay, well, this is the other move. And this attacks f7, attacks the bishop. For example, if black defends against both those threats, you can now play bishop to e5, attacking the rook in the corner. And if f6, well, this is a little test for you guys. You're playing the King's Gambit. There's a number of tempting moves here. You're a piece down, whole piece down. Now, you need to play with energy in the King's Gambit. You need to get all your pieces like in harmony. It's very important in the King's Gambit. All your pieces need to be dancing together when you play the King's Gambit. How can you do that here? Bishop to c4. Threatening queen to h5 and queen f7. And, well, already black is in serious trouble. Queen to e7 looks like the only option. If we take on e5, queen f7 is mate. And after something like queen to e7, we can just play something like bishop takes c7. And black's king is in a mating net, or he's going to lose vicious material. For example, knight c6, check. And so this bishop takes d4 move is far too greedy. I mean, black should not be going for this bishop takes d4 move. I mean, knight to c6 was played in the game, much more logical move, just trying to bring the knight out. And when you're a piece up, or a good practical bit of advice you're trying to defend is don't get over greedy, just concentrate on developing and getting your king castled. And now bishop to c4, so increasing the pressure against f7. Here, black went for knight takes d4, and this is where real action happens. Other moves, well, other moves can run into lots of danger as well. White can simply castle, or you may have a bishop takes f7 check here as well. But knight to d4 is critical. A test for you here. White to play, what should white do? Pause the video if you need to. Remember, you're trying to play energetic chess. You sacrifice one piece, you can't be afraid. try to calculate a sequence of moves here that will give you a very strong attack. Bishop takes f7 check, and this is the way you go forwards. What's another piece? You've already given up one piece, hell to it. You might as well give up another piece. Have them all. Have all the pieces. And now king takes f7 was played, and the point behind white's play is this queen to h5 check. Black's king is in serious trouble here. Now, king to e6 looks like suicide after something like queen to d5 check. The black king's not going to last very long. So king to f8 is the only option. And now how can white increase the pressure? Point here, the f file is open. How can you increase the pressure? Castles. A lovely move here. And, well, black is in dire straits. Knight to f6 is played in the game. I'm going to give you another puzzle. If queen to e8 here, trying to exchange the queens off the board, which obviously would help black, it's white to play, and it's checkmate in one move here. Pause the video if you need to. Bishop to d6, checkmate. Double check, unleashing the rook and the bishop against black's king. So very strong idea. So queen to e8 is not possible. Knight to f6 was played. And now we use the f file here. Bishop to e5, using the pin on the knight. And this is an important factor. Now d6 was played in the game. And white simply... Okay, d6 wasn't played because if it is, white simply takes on d4. And this knight on f6 is going to drop. For example... King g8, trying to get out of the pin, simply queen to h4, and white takes on f6 next move. White has another pin now, the pin on the queen. So d6 is too passive here. Black tried to go queen e8 here, swapping off queens, and now white's finished in brilliant style here. Verhoff finished with a flourish of brilliance, should I say here. Really nice finish. You can try to go for it yourself. Now, again, positions like this goes back to what I was saying. When you're trying to attack, you've got to play with the initiative energetically. You can't just sit back and, wait. You've got to just go for the energy and find the most attacking moves. Look for checks, look for captures. And here, rook takes f6 was a great way to finish the game. Bishop takes f6 was played, and now the point behind white's last move, queen to h6 check. Only one way to avoid a very quick checkmate. That's king to g8. Now, simply queen takes f6. This very strong diagonal for the queen and bishop is looking good. And black desperately tried knight to f3 check. White could have played g takes f3, but then black has swapped the queens off. Of course, black is still probably losing there. But white's finished in style. And after queen takes e5, even though white's a rook down, after rook to f1, black resigned here because there's no way he can deal with the threats to his king. I mean, the immediate threat is queen to f7 or queen to f8, checkmate. Let's say black tries to defend against this with something along the lines of queen to e7. Well, there's options here, but probably one simple option is knight to d5, bringing our last piece in and attacking the queen. Black can go queen to c5 check, but we simply tuck our king on h1. And again, queen to f7 check is pretty much unstoppable here. I mean, king g7, we go queen f6, force the king back, and then queen f7. All looking pretty horrible. And if not queen e7 in the original position, what else can black play? Can he try queen e8? Well, again, even here, white has time to simply move his knight to d5. And even though black is a rook up, like I mentioned before, look at black's pieces. They've all gone to bed on the back rank here. None of them are looking happy. They may as well have stayed in bed in this game, and they're going to be there for the rest of the game. So a very nice game for white there, a nice attacking idea. Let's just go over the major points, theoretically, and we're concentrating on this g5 move. And now knight to c3 is what I'm suggesting. And after a move like d6 or bishop g7, we get both our pawns in the center. Now, as a rule here, if you're given a chance, if white is given a chance, he should play g3. So if black plays a passive move like d6, g3 is the way we want to play. And if black goes for g4, then we simply give our piece on f3, and we get everything attacking, everything lined up against black's position, and we have to look out for energetic moves like bishop to f7. exactly like Johann Furhoff did in this game. And another lovely attacking game to finish our series of knight to f3. In the next 2 games in this King's Gambit series, I'm going to look at White's other option earlier on, and that is the move bishop to c4. So I hope you enjoyed the ideas with knight to f3, g5, and I really hope that's kind of whet your appetite to play the King's Gambit with knight to f3 in future. I can't wait myself to give this opening a try.